Hello, everyone. It's Chris Howard at saltwaterwitch.com. That's where I post my stuff, so go check it out. And this is part two of my first experiences with the William Optics SpaceCat 51 Petzval Apo Refractor. It's a 250 millimeter focal length f4.9. I have two different imaging trains, a narrowband and a color one, and I described those in the prior video, so go check those out. But it's essentially a ZWO ASI071MC and a ZWO ASI1600mm Pro. Those are my two main cameras. So, as is typical, when I got a brand new piece of Astro hardware, the weather went sideways. And over the last 2 or 3 weeks, I haven't had there haven't been a lot of clear skies, but I did have three over the course of those weeks. And I spent one night with the narrowband setup and two with the color setup. So let's take a look at those. So here's a stacked and processed shot, reasonably processed. There are no calibration frames from the first night with my narrowband setup. And I just did HA. And partly because I don't have an autofocuser and I just didn't feel like going out and focusing in between each filter. But it really was just a test, so I wanted to see how well this scope performed, doing something relatively bright like NGC 7000. I was already impressed by the build quality, design characteristics. This is an extremely portable, it's a wide field scope. That's what you get one of the Red Cats or SpaceCats for. But the edge-to-edge sharpness of the images, I was shooting during the daylight. I just did some daylight testing, shooting pictures of trees, or the forest, and just the edge-to-edge sharpness just astounded me. So it didn't surprise me when the first shots of nebulae with this small versatile refractor were just amazing. The team at William Optics has just done a great job putting this together, designing this, and putting this together. So here's a stack of 10 subs of NGC 7000 North American Nebula in Cygnus, with a bit of the surrounding region, including the Pelican Nebula. It's 10 240-second exposures stacked in Deep Sky Stacker. There are no calibration frames. I just didn't bother with this because it was a test. So this was shot with the William Optics SpaceCat 51, the ZWO ASI1600mm Pro mono, and I have in the filter wheel for that train, I have astronomic 6 nanometer narrowband filters. So this is just the hydrogen alpha filter in this case. This is also with the Orion. I did off-axis guiding. That's what I normally do. And my guide cam is the ZWO ASI120mm Mini. The guiding is spectacular, but as you would expect with such a short focal length, 250 millimeter, and stars are bright. I just didn't have any problems. Part of the reason why I have these trains set up, and I call them a train because I don't take them apart. All of the distances, everything I've already worked out, I can move them from, I have an Astrotech Richie Chrétien. I can move it from that. I have a William Optics GT81. I can just move between those without changing anything other than the overall, focal, where that focal distance is. And that's up to the focuser, not the imaging train, quote unquote train. So in this image, I didn't crop anything. This is just, I stacked and processed in Photoshop CC 2019. And just for some background information, NGC 7000 North America Nebula, IC 5070 is the Pelican Nebula, and IC 5068 is that lower right cloudy area. And these are all part of the same H2 region in the constellation Cygnus. NGC 7000 is about 1,800 light years away in the Orion arm of our Milky Way. With this field of view, we're looking at over 140 trillion miles of clouds of interstellar ionized hydrogen. It's just crazy to think about those numbers. It's lit up by the massive binary star HD 199579, and it's located approximately where Chicago would be if you're looking at this as North America. The dark bands and filaments of dust in front of these vast glowing clouds, that includes LDN 935, B352, 356, bunch of others, those help form the eponymous North America Nebula shape, the North America shape. So it blocks out a large region, the Gulf of Mexico, and it runs up the East Coast and across the Northeast Passage, like of Canada. So those clouds are actually in front of all those trillions of miles of hydrogen gas. So let's move on to a couple nights with the color camera, the ZWO ASI071MC. I have this mounted on the iOptron CEM25P, and this is in my backyard. And this is the actual setup I used for the following. Everything else for the rest of the video. Let's take a look. Because of the time of year, this time of year, I went through a set of just sort of standard targets, M31, 33, and 45. The seeing wasn't perfect, but it was good enough to shoot these targets. And of course, Andromeda and the Pleiades are massively bright objects and large. So yeah, I came away impressed with just some simple shots. And I'm going to say these were 30-second and 60-second shots. I did not go out of my way to kind of pull out a lot of that cloudiness and the wispiness that's around the Pleiades. I also didn't, and I'll come back to that because I actually spent the next night, going after that a little bit more. And with M31, I just took a sort of a standard set. And I think it was like 10 or 15 exposures at low exposure times, probably 30 and 60-second exposures. As you can tell, this was still experimental stage with this new telescope. And so I didn't even keep track of how much time. I was just taking shots and stacking and seeing what turned out. The few nights that followed that were cloudy. Some rain. It was just I couldn't get outside. So then I went back to a project I spent most of the time thinking about while I was doing the narrowband stuff. And I really want autofocus on the SpaceCat. So I started building a prototype. For my prototype, I went with the Moonlight Focuser protocol with Joe Alvarezio's ArduFocus. And it's ARDUFOCUS.com, ArduFocus.com. To find more about that. It's popular. It's also on GitHub. Actually, that's where the code is. And the setup uses the setup that Razio has put together uses an Arduino Nano microcontroller and an A4988 stepper driver. He actually has several configurations. This is really, really cool stuff if you're interested in do-it-yourself autofocuser. For tests, I used a NEMA 11 stepper with a 1:100 ratio planetary gearbox. I figured I'm going to need a lot of torque. I also wanted something small. I didn't want to have something that sits on top of the cat. I wanted something I could actually add and remove with portability. Portability was the primary concern here. I wanted to be able to set up, add my imaging train, put the focuser on, and then have that work, and then a teardown at the end of the night, put that all away and dismantle it, and everything goes back in the boxes or bags. So I have actually been, before I even bought the cat, I was actually looking at what was out there. And so I looked at Deep Sky Dad's products. I have an AF1, one of the old ones. And, and I like Pavel's approach of using a 3D printed ring that goes around the cat's focus ring for the timing belt. That's just a great idea. I'm also a big fan of K-Aztec in Japan. And their approach uses what looks like a standard GT2 belt flipped inside out and just sort of glued down, and that actually provides that timing belt, almost like creates a timing belt pulley out of the focus ring on the cat. Neat stuff. If you're interested, just Google those and go find out. I have a batch of timing belts, and the best fit I saw with the cat's actual focus ring was a 2.5 millimeter pitch belt, and it wasn't perfect. And I was waiting for a pulley, and I had some other things, but I was goofing around with the ArduFocus code and doing stuff like that. It didn't actually end up working out that well, but I did end up putting together, and you can see in the pics, what I think is the way I'm going to go, and that with an autofocuser, and that is to use the camera rail, the small rig stuff. You see it on Amazon, you see it all over, and you see it. This is the stuff that you see with like cinema cameras. They bolt on all of this cool electronic components, and what I bought were a few of those. One was the rail, the 15 millimeter rail, and then little holders for it. That can all be just loosened and taken off. And then there's a single one that actually has a threaded top that I could actually mount a motor to. And that actually was what I was doing here. this didn't actually work out. This got me started thinking that this is the way I want to go. But it didn't actually work out. I think it really came down to the cat's focus ring. It's made for human fingers to grip this and move it, and it's a little softer. It's basically probably much softer rubber than would be in sort of almost more rigid timing belt, or the timing belt pulley, of course, which would be aluminum or some sort of metal. So it just never would grip that focus ring. The focus ring itself on the cat is it's very smooth, but it takes a little bit of effort, too much effort for this little stepper motor. And I actually don't think it was the stepper or the belt. I think it really is about how rigid that focus ring is, and it just isn't made to be turned with the timing belt. Even if I had the belt, the pitch, everything just right, so it lined up with those grooves, I don't think it would work. So I ended up emailing back and forth with Pavel at deepskydad.com, and I ended up just ordering the AF3S. He's got a working system. I'm going to use this. My interest here isn't to necessarily build, which I like that, necessarily build my own autofocus system. It's to get autofocus on the cat and have portability be the main driving aspect of that. So I actually showed him these pictures, and we went back and forth in email, and that's what I've ordered, and I'll get that in a couple weeks, and I should be back in business, or should be in business with my narrowband setup. And I will definitely post pics and shoot a video for that as well when that arrives and I get that set up. Okay, so let's move on to the third night of imaging with my color camera, and that was a far more successful night, mostly because I was not as much in experimental mode. I really wanted to shoot some real images here. I did go to M45 Pleiades. I went back to that because I wasn't happy with the ones I just did in the first run, because those were just short exposures. So I did pull out some of that, and I'll show that in a bit. But let's start with some of the stuff in Orion. Yeah, and the constellation Orion, it's my favorite. It's probably a lot of it's a lot of people's favorite constellation. It holds a special place in my heart. From Barnard's Loop to Witch's Head across from Rigel, to the pair of stars at Orion's shoulders, Betelgeuse and Bellatrix, of course M42, the Orion Nebula, which we really should continue to call the Great Orion Nebula because, well, it's great and arguably magnificent. Among all of Orion's well-studied and photographed nebulae is another one of my favorites, and that's it's sort of mysterious. I love M78. I just love the coloring. I love the way it just sort of sits out there. It's I would describe it as sort of violently colored and shaped. It's a reflection nebula. It has this coils of dark clouds of interstellar dust that almost make it look like it's poised to attack Barnard's Loop. So just a beautiful object out there in the sky in Orion. So I shot a dozen frames at 240 seconds each. I should have gone longer, and I'm going to come back to it. This whole season, Orion's going to be up in the sky for us, so in the northern hemisphere anyway. So I'll be back with this. I'm not that happy with it, but I think it came out well enough that I posted it on my blog. I want to step back in time because I think earlier in the night I actually shot M45, and I'm really happy with the way this turned out, because I did manage to pull out a lot of that cloudiness, that nebulosity in front of those massive blue stars in M45. I also managed to pull out a lot of the sort of background dust in here, or some of it anyway. So pretty happy with this, with just essentially my first real night out with the SpaceCat and the color rig. So I went with longer exposures for M45. So this is 28. I think it's 8 600-second subs and 20 480-second subs. And the reason I dropped back to 480, and I ended up shooting 480, which is 8 minutes, which is an unusual exposure time for me. I'm usually go from 5 to 10, but I was goofing around again with this, and I cut it back from 609 minutes to 8 minutes, and I could not tell the difference. But at 8, I think that there's a sort of a diminishing return after whatever, 5, 6, 7 minutes, and 8 seemed to be the sweet spot with this, and so that's what I did. And I actually continued through the night to use 480-second exposures. The only issue is that I had to go back and shoot dark frames for it because I didn't have any at 480. So that's M45. I also went from there to the Triangulum Galaxy M33, and I used, in this case, I used a really old Celestron UHC LPR, like an ultra high contrast light pollution filter. And it has long pass bands at 450, roughly 450 to 550 nanometers, and then another jump at, let the full band through from 600 to 700 nanometers. This is not exactly the dual narrowband passes of one of those high-end color filters like the STC Astro Duo narrowband, but the results were pretty good. I was actually pretty impressed. And I have used this in the past before with the GT81 and with other scopes, and have been pretty impressed with it. And this is like an $80 or $100 filter. This is a really inexpensive filter. It just did a decent job of bringing out the O3 and the HA color ranges, which would be just washed out in the full mix of broadband with my normal IR UV cut filter. That's what I normally run in the filter drawer with the 071. So the M33 is about 2.7 million light years away from us, and it's about 600,000 light years across with 40 billion stars. So it's a nice medium-sized object. It's not too bright, so you can actually shoot longer exposures and pull out a lot. Andromeda is just crazy, violently bright, and you have to watch out. It's like the trapezium in M42. You might have to do composite photos, do some that are 10-second exposures, that kind of thing. Triangulum, you're not going to have that. You just shoot full, long exposures. So with this bicolor filtered view of the Triangulum, I love the way this came out. It showed off, the dozens of large H2 regions at the end of the red end of the spectrum. Those are the red and pink masses distributed around the galaxy spiral arms. My conclusion? There's some kick-ass deep sky astrophotography going on right now in any of the developed civilizations in M33. Not that we'll ever know for sure, outside our light cone and all that stuff. Well, not until we crack that thorny faster than light travel problem. But until then, we're at the make do with just shooting our perspective of M33. And I think this came out rather well. Let's move on to my final target of the night, and that is just the whole Orion's belt region. I was using Sequence Generator Pro. That's what I used for this night. And in the Framing and Mosaic Wizard, or whatever it's called, you go in, you put in a field of view and put in an object, and I think I put in Horsehead Nebula or something like that, and then when my field of view, you get the box comes up, and it's like, oh, I want to frame it this way, and that's what I did. So I got all 3 stars in there, which I really liked the way this came out. So this is a wide field shot, all 3 primary stars in Orion's belt, sometimes called the 3 sisters. So that's Alnitak, Alnilam, and Mintaka. And I say primary, quote unquote primary, because Alnitak, that's the bottom one in this rotation, is a triple star system. Although Alnilam that's the one in the middle, is a supergiant on its own. It's 375,000 times more luminous than our star, Sun. Mintaka at the top is a double star system, and this is cool. The 2 stars orbit each other every 5.7 days. So yeah, I like to see that up close. 2 massive stars spinning around each other that quickly. So the bottom right, you can see the Horsehead Nebula there. It's a little tiny, Barnard 33, and NGC 2024. That's the Flame Nebula to the left and a little bit lower than the Horsehead, with Alnitak between them. Again, I use the Celestron UHC LPR filter for these subs, and that's also what's causing the halos around the brighter stars. And, I know the sticklers out there will think these are an abomination, but I'm okay with them. And I don't see halos as that much different from the diffraction spikes we get with our SCTs or the Ritchie-Chrétiens. Anything with those veins or anything that's in the path of the light. I mean, the freaking Hubble has diffraction spikes in the stars, so I can deal with some haloing, especially with an $80, $100 filter. And to me, this is I love this image. I love the way it came out. I probably will go back and shoot this again, just to try some different exposure times. I might want to do this in narrowband as well with the same, roughly the same, because I say roughly the same field of view because the 1600 is smaller. You know, the ASI071, the color camera, is a APS-C size sensor, and the 1600 is a 4/3. So I'll see what I can do with that. But I love the way this this came out in terms of how it sits on how it fits in the frame. So that's where I ended up with the first 3 nights shooting the sky with the William Optics SpaceCat 51. And I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for watching. Thanks for getting this far into the video. And clear skies, everyone. I will see you next time. This is Chris at saltwaterwitch.com. Check out my site and see you later.